I'm Taylor.
I'm Melissa.
This is our Cinema Romance. Today we ask what happens in the second act of Aliens.
Yay. Those of you who have never watched before, thank you so much for coming today. Please like and subscribe. And those of you who are coming back, thank you for coming back. We really appreciate you guys watching us every week, and hope that you're enjoying it. Please let us know how we're doing and let us know what you think in comments. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So we are talking about Aliens. Going back to our very first episode, we differentiated between movies that we have seen since we've been together and movies that we knew before we were together. And it aligns really kind of perfectly with the turn of the millennium.
Yes.
Aliens is one of my top 5 old millennium movies. You didn't see it.
Yeah, I actually, when I was younger, I was actually afraid of aliens and Alien. My mother had warned me against it, had told me, oh, it's the scariest thing she's ever seen. So I was like, okay. So I just, as a kid, did not watch Alien and did not see Aliens when it came out in the theater. It was only when I was taking a film class that, in college, that first I watched Alien, and I saw it just on, video, and it was, I was stunned at how gorgeous and beautiful it was. And then I saw Aliens, it was screened at school, so I got to see it on a big screen, and it really was quite a film. I still think I like Alien better, but I do think they're two different genres. So in that case, I think they're both like amazing films in those genres. I don't even like comparing them, honestly, because I think they're both amazing films. They are
both amazing films, and I do agree, while they share some visual vocabulary, same characters, the alien is obviously consistent in both. They are very different movies.
Yeah.
One is horror sci-fi, the other is like action thriller more than anything else, really.
Speaking of, if you're curious, we have done a previous video on Alien talking about, is it horror, is it sci-fi, which one? So if you guys want to check that out after this, or even stop this and watch that first, please do.
So we're talking about Aliens, the 1986 movie directed by James Cameron. We are talking about the theatrical cut. Not going to go into a lot of detail about the special edition. Synopsize the movie quickly, and we'll jump in with stuff about the special edition if necessary or appropriate. The movie picks up after Alien. Alien ends after Sigourney Weaver has defeated the alien, destroyed the ship. All of her crew has died. She is alone in a shuttle. Aliens picks up. The shuttle has been adrift in space for 57 years. She cannot produce any evidence to corroborate the story of Alien. She basically gets thrown to the wolves by the company that she worked for, ends up having to take a job on loading docks or something, finds out that there is in fact a colony of terraformers on the planet where they had found the craft with the alien eggs. Some amount of time passes and they lose contact with the colony. And Ripley is approached by a representative from the company as well as a Marine lieutenant. They are going to send in a team of Marines just to see what's going on.
Yeah, to see why they've lost contact. They think maybe it's nothing, but just in case Ripley was right, maybe there's something bad there, they're going to send in this team of very, very tough Marines.
They think they are, at the very least. When we think about a movie, a story has a protagonist, and a protagonist has a goal. At this point in the story, what is Ripley's goal?
Well, she's been having nightmares, right? So I think Ripley's goal is to go just do this thing to feel like she's facing it. I think it's a personal choice. Like, she can either keep having nightmares, or she can face this with what she thinks is going to be this, very tough team that will protect her, even though I feel like she's still I don't know about that, but she's going to do it anyways.
And I think there's also, because she believes her story, She believes that when they get there, they are going to encounter a hostile alien force or like a hostile alien life form, and that alien life form needs to be eliminated.
Yeah.
But she, at least at the beginning of the movie, isn't going to be in a position to do anything about that.
Yeah.
But she says, it's like, just tell me one thing. We're going back there to destroy.
Yeah.
Not to study, not to bring back.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the goal of the movie.
Yeah.
Like that's what the protagonist wants to do. Which, when you think about it, isn't a very compelling goal. Like, this is somebody who's basically going to hitch a ride on a military transport so that this military team can maybe do something, maybe not, depending on what the problem is, and then she's going to go back home. It's interesting to me that it's not more compelling. Think about some of the other movies that we've talked about with the second act. Poltergeist. They have to get their daughter out of the television. The Thing. They are being systematically hunted.
Yeah.
They have to survive. Even Jagged Edge. This guy's on trial for murder.
Yeah.
He needs to be found innocent.
You know what? That might be why Cameron initially had those other things in there. To try to say, like, she wants to go to help those terraforming families.
When you say other things, are you talking about the stuff that was cut from the special edition?
Yes, the stuff that was cut.
So...
I still think it should have been cut, but I mean, maybe that was what he was thinking.
So
maybe
some of what there's a lot that is in the special edition that I think is just it's fun, but it's extraneous. It's like it's stuff that can easily be cut from the movie. There are a couple things that he cut that I do think changed the tone of the movie. Not in in considerable ways. One. In the special edition, Ripley had a daughter who died while she was adrift in space. Ripley ends up developing a relationship with the only survivor of the colony, a young girl named Newt. I think that if she had a daughter that she lost, it cheapens the relationship.
I agree. Because without that scene, it's still a completely believable dynamic, and it's very organic, and it's very nice. And if you have this reason like, oh, she's just trying to replace this memory of her daughter, then it does cheapen it. Like, I agree with that.
And, I mean, leads to, like, some potentially unhealthy outcomes. Like, as, life goes on. The other big thing that I do think makes a difference, at least tonally, is a lot of what you're talking about. We do see the colony when it is still active before any kind of event has taken place. I think it was good to cut that, mainly because when you do get to the colony in the theatrical cut, when it's abandoned,
it's very creepy.
You have no idea what happened. Where anybody is, and it's like not knowing any of these people. Was anybody ever there? It's just it's like a ghost town. Like just a town that just disappeared overnight. It's like 100 and it's over 100 people. It's
Roanoke.
I mean, a little bit, yeah. It is.
Surprised they didn't write Croatoan like somewhere. But no, it's
for those who don't know, that's one you can Google later. I see what you're saying. Even then,
is it strong enough?
It doesn't like it doesn't change her motivation.
No, but I completely agree with you. I still think it says a lot about her character though, because she's very confrontational. We certainly learned that about her in the first film. She's always calling out BS.
She does not back down from a fight.
She does not back down. She sees something, she will tell you. She is the kind of person you want on your side. You want, like, she is incorruptible. She is at least that's a very
I mean,
Like
as like the
she,
characterization,
yeah,
absolutely.
she is very like she's going to do what's right. She's thinking, she's doing, she's really a great character. And I think already knowing that about her, I think that we accept her reasoning and going.
Well, see, I'm bringing all this up because it's going to become significant when we discuss the second act.
All right.
What happens? The terraforming colony has been abandoned. There is one survivor. It's a young girl who goes by Newt.
Newt. Sorry. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. I'm sorry. Mostly. Sorry.
I wasn't sure if you were going to break now or break later. I was like, do I pause and let her get the mostly? If you haven't seen it, this will make no sense to you. If you have seen it, hopefully you are laughing along with us.
Mostly.
It's definitely a memorable line reading.
Yes.
Anyway, they end up finding where the colonists are congregated. They have actually been moved by the aliens into a nest. They have been spun into these cocoons so that they can basically be incubators for more aliens. There are, I mean, scores of aliens at this point. All of this, like, we don't know any of this until they go into the nest to try and rescue the guy. They don't even know they're going into a nest.
They think they're
they just know
the colonists are all hanging out here.
Yeah, they're all just bunched together in this one place. And at this point, most of the Marines get wiped out.
Yeah.
They lose a ton of weapons. They lose the transport to get back to the orbiting ship. And now it becomes a movie about survival.
Yeah.
It comes down to really just it's Ripley on her own again. There is one surviving Marine, but he is severely injured. There's an android who is responsible for keeping piloting the ship and making sure that it is available, because in the course of all the stuff that happened after the attack in the nest, the terraforming facility or machinery, it's a fusion reactor, and it's about to melt down.
Yeah.
So the whole colony is, I mean, it's falling, literally falling apart. The android, Bishop, is responsible for making sure that the surviving Marine is okay, that the transport back to the main ship is okay, because Ripley has to rescue Newt.
Yes.
Newt was captured by aliens. So she has to rescue Newt. In the course of doing so, encounters the Queen alien.
Who's so cool. So cool.
Manages to escape the Queen alien with Newt up to the ship, escapes the planet, the thermonuclear explosion happens, and then we find out the Queen alien's stowed away on the ship, and Ripley has to fight her hand to hand by driving
big
this
loader.
loader.
Oh, it's so good. It's just like there's cool sequins on top of cool sequins on top of cool sequins. Like, it's really exciting. Like, as an action movie, it's phenomenal. It really, there's nothing wrong with that movie. It is a perfect
I think it is a perfect movie.
Yeah,
I really do. It builds so elegantly on what came before, managed to take it in a different direction.
Yeah.
Without feeling like it's a completely different universe, or that's one of the things that I think fails in some of the follow-ups, is it's these characters aren't even inhabiting the same world, whereas in Aliens they definitely are. This is still the same world from the first movie.
Yeah.
So it is expanding that world, and
it uses the DNA really well to evolve into something different.
Yes. Yes, that is an excellent way of putting it.
Kudos to Jim, to my old boss, for like designing the queen alien. Like she is
Yes.
so amazing. And I mean, clearly he takes elements. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. Like he takes the DNA, obviously that Giger had, but then like kind of created his own thing, and it's so cool.
Like again, the like that it's not a crown, obviously, but
Yeah.
that plating that you believe, because different animals have different ways of like visually indicating supremacy.
Yeah.
You know, in some cases it might be a swollen behind.
Yeah.
You know, if you're talking about a baboon. Here, clearly, this like
Yeah.
additional plating is part of what makes the queen the queen.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, that's a great idea.
The claws, like all of it, like just like it's just so neat looking. It just evolved in a way that she looks different enough, but the same enough that it just works. It's when we call out how a bad design, like in the fourth Alien movie, in Alien Resurrection, a bad design can really dampen a movie.
Don't need to go into
yeah.
too much detail about this,
but that's just, it's a good example of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. So the question we're asking today is, what happens to the second act?
Ooh.
Do you want to take a stab at this?
You know, this movie's tricky, I think, because I don't know where the second act would start exactly, because the first act you think would be, you know, Ripley being found, Ripley getting reacquainted with the world, and then maybe the second act starting when Ripley decides to go on this mission. But I don't think that's it.
Well, okay.
Or is it?
This is why we've talked about every movie that we've talked about the second act so far. There has been a clear answer.
Yeah.
We talked about Poltergeist, you rescue Carrie Ann. We talked about The Thing, you find out who's human. We talked about Jagged Edge, it's the court case.
Yeah.
This is a movie where I feel like the answer is not obvious. I did do a little bit of research this week. I don't usually, but this week I did. I was trying to find a definition for an act. And this was remarkably difficult to do. A lot of the time, it just boiled down to, like, the act ends when the writer says it ends. Like, if you're writing a play, the writer says curtain, that's the end of the act.
There you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Except, obviously, that's not it, because that's not storytelling.
Yeah.
So when we talk about story structure, we're not necessarily trying to say what a story is supposed to be. It's more giving shape to what stories are.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's how I think of it anyway.
All right.
And I looked at a lot of different approaches to story structure. There's, I forgot, I think it's Freytag's pyramid. This was a 5-act structure that this guy developed based on studying Greek tragedies. There's obviously the 3-act structure, which is what most people are familiar with. That is just very basically beginning, middle, end. There was one, it was something about the cat not having food. I can't remember what the name of it is. But it was like a story like starts with a crisis and just moves from one crisis point to another. It's basically a way of skipping the introduction.
Okay.
Even though it still allows for opportunities to do what the introduction does, because a story, there has to be some status quo. There has to be some like way to establish characters and motivation and things like that. Really, all of the different approaches to story structure are accomplishing the same thing. Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, the monomyth, he is basically giving structure to stories that have already been told.
Yeah.
These structures are studied and analyzed because they work.
Yeah.
They do mean something. They do accomplish something. And people innately get it. They get, for the most part, they get how a story is supposed to flow.
Okay, yeah.
And when I talk about what happens in the second act, I'm basically trying to distill people's innate understanding of story structure into something like easy and memorable. Because if you're writing a story, there's so many. If you want to follow the Freytag pyramid guy, if you want to follow the cat doesn't have any food thing, if you want to follow the hero's journey, whatever it is, you're ultimately going to be telling a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Like no matter what, and the middle is the hard part, and that's what this whole like this series, if you want to call it that, is about. Is just being able to identify the middle, nail it down, so that if somebody says to you, what happens in the second act of your story? If you can answer that question, you might be writing a bad story, but by God, it's going to be a recognizable story. It's going to be a story that people understand.
I was going to say, I feel like there's a couple different places in Aliens that I could say that about.
About? Say what
like
about?
Where it could be. Like where exactly... Because, like, Aliens is perfect, but I'm still not sure
This is why I was asking, this is why I was asking, like, what is her goal at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, like, Back to the Future, the first one we did in the series, he ends up in 1955, he has to get back to 1985. That is his goal, and that is what the whole movie's about. Did you just have an epiphany of some sort?
Yes, you just taught me something, I think.
Did I?
Yes. In talking about how important the goal must be, is the second act when after they get wiped out and it becomes about, is her saving Newt the second act? Or is it them getting off the planet together?
All right, we're going to come back to that.
Great, now I have more questions.
We're going to come back to that because in the research and reading about these different things and trying to find something that defines an act, the most compelling thing that I've found is someone said that because there's scenes are usually like one scene to another is usually a change in either location or time. Then scenes build into sequences and sequences build into acts and others again. An act ends when there is a point of no return. Mm. And now this is something that people who have studied story structure will have heard before. It's part of, I think it's part of the Joseph Campbell's thing, the point of no return, although he probably calls it something goofier. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that specific moment that you will read. And I mean, some of this stuff, it's like the point of no return happens on page 78. Like, you know, like that. We're not talking about anything that precise. But let's look at Aliens from that perspective. Okay, so the first point of no return, after the story started, I would say is when she decides to go to space.
Okay, so that's like, that could start?
That would be the end of the first act.
End of the first act.
In my opinion.
Yeah, she decides to go to space.
Now, does that mean that the second act is the mission?
And the whole mission, would that last until they take off from the planet?
Yes.
Okay.
If you ask the question, what happens in the second act of Aliens, the answer could be the mission. Or it could be she rescues Newt. Which means that the second act would begin after they find Newt. But that doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
But, like, I've talked to various people about this. There are some people who say, or I've heard people say that the first act begins with the nest.
Yeah.
Or it ends with the nest. That's the beginning of the second act. Here's the problem with that. At the end of that scene, and for anybody who's seen the movie, it's when Hicks is saying, Ripley, ease down, ease down, ease down. She's just rescued the few that have survived. Yeah. Okay, I paused the movie there. We were at 1 hour and 9 minutes, and there was 1 hour and 8 minutes left. I've heard people say it just has a really long first act. Okay, that's almost half the movie long. That is an extremely long first act. Even if you want to say Newt, that's still like to put it in those terms is to say that the protagonist didn't really have a goal, or the true goal didn't manifest until, I mean,
Is it
40 minutes into the movie.
did it manifest right after the nest? Would you say because then it's a survival story and that's a strong enough point of no return?
Here's my answer.
Oh, okay.
And I want to see what you think about this.
Okay, all right.
Aliens has 4 acts. Act 1. We establish the new status quo. She is back on Earth. She is not a flight officer anymore. But then she finds out they've lost communication with the colony. So she has to go back. This is the first, like, and whatever you want to call it, point of no return, but like the first big shift
Yeah.
in her intention, in the, like, where the story is taking us. And that lasts until the nest.
Okay.
So Act 2 is trying to find out what happened.
Okay.
This is them investigating the mystery.
If you looked at it like the setup, the mystery, the answer, and the...
Well, then the third act, although we're not talking about the third act in the sense of the climax of the story. So if you want to say the second act, part 2, and lots of movies have a midpoint. If you study story structure, you know this is a big thing that some people will harp on. A movie should have a midpoint, and it's usually some point where things do sort of come to a head, and I don't have any good midpoint examples ready, but I don't think The Nest counts as a midpoint because, again, the whole nature of the story, of her goal, shifts. Because after The Nest, they are not investigating. It is not a rescue mission.
Yeah.
Everything that the characters, like even Ripley, believing that the aliens were already there, I think assumed that the Marines would be able to deal with it. It did not become this, like, it did not become a matter of survival. And that's what the second half of the second act part B, that's what it is. It's survival. It's not investigation. It's not rescue. They are just trying to survive.
Okay. When does that end?
I would say it ends either... I would say it ends when she decides to go back for Newt.
Okay.
Because at that point, they had made it. But she makes the choice to go back and rescue her. And either that, or if you want to be maybe a little bit more didactic about it, it happens when they actually leave the planet. But that doesn't feel right to me because that part of the movie is kind of, it's supposed to be sort of a bonus, a twist.
Yeah. I like the word bonus. What I was thinking is, could it be kind of the 5-act thing in which it like ramps up, like...
What, I am no expert on this. What I remember from the small amount of research that I did, the Freytag's pyramid thing, he put what he called the conclusion in the middle.
Oh.
Or I shouldn't say in the middle, it was Act 3.
Okay.
But it was very lopsided. Yeah. So Acts 1, 2, and 3 constituted like 60, 70%, and then the rest of it sort of fell off from there. The problem with that is so much of the, not just the meat of the story, but the characters and the characterization come out in the survival section.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an easy answer to the question, I don't think there is one.
Yeah.
Does not take away from the movie in any way, shape, or form. And this is, when I was talking about storytelling being, like, when I was saying that people have sort of an innate understanding of the beats of a story, this is what I was, like, it's not like you're watching Aliens for the first, like, hour and you're bored.
Yeah.
An audience knows that if the story were she hitches a ride with this military team. It turns out it is a down transmitter. They help get everything back up and running, and they all go home. That's not like nobody
Yeah.
would be telling that story.
Yeah.
That is not a story worth telling. So the audience knows that there's going to be more to it than that. They know that we're going to see an alien again.
Yeah.
Given the title of the movie, they know that we're going to see more than one.
Yeah.
If the story were being told poorly, that first hour would be boring.
Yeah.
You would be waiting for the aliens to show up.
Yeah.
This is where I think that trying to understand some of the subtleties and what makes an act, what makes a successful story successful, like this is why it's important, because it would be very easy to just say, hey, we know how we want this story to go. There's going to be this big thing in the middle of the movie where they find all the aliens. What are we going to do for the first half? I don't know. Just string it along. We can, like, you know, a lot of filler, spin our wheels. This is grindhouse movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is how grindhouse movies were made.
Yeah.
Is there'd be one or two like big sequences that they put all the money in, and then there's just a lot of like conversations, people driving, you know. It would be that kind of a movie.
Yeah.
But it's not. And I think it is because there is a clear beginning to the second act.
Yeah.
The second act begins when she decides to go to space.
Okay.
But you can't, I don't think it captures the story to say that that's it.
Yeah.
Like, what happens in the second act? She goes, like, that's not...
Yeah.
That's, like, she has to defeat the aliens. She doesn't know they're aliens.
Yeah.
She has to, she has to rescue the colonist. Well, they can't rescue the colonist. All but one of them is dead.
Yeah.
Like, but if you look at it as second act, she goes to space until they find the aliens, and then that is another point of no return.
Yeah.
At that point, they know what's happening. They know what the threat is. It is no longer about rescuing anybody. They have to survive.
So I'm just thinking about the big beats, like after she goes to space. Like, so it would be like she's in space, you meet everybody, that's more kind of like exposition kind of stuff. And then we get, so it's almost like Ripley gets her own first act, and then we get kind of like a first act with meeting all the Marines.
Maybe.
And then maybe the second act of them together is...
You know, you said something interesting about, like, meeting the other characters. That's true. As far as the only characters that are significant after she goes to the colony, who we also meet in the first act.
Hudson! Sorry.
We don't meet Hudson in the first act.
Not in the first act.
Burke and the lieutenant.
Burke and the lieutenant.
But everybody else, Hudson, Hicks, Vasquez, Bishop.
Yeah.
These are all people that we meet.
Newt.
So, is that the first act? Do we establish a different status quo once we get there?
That's interesting.
But ultimately, the point stands, whether you want to say there are two first acts, or there's a pre-act and a first act and a second act, or there are, I think, 4 clear sections to this movie. 4 clear points of delineation in terms of character motivation, the thrust of the story, the way the story is being told. Like, there are 4 times on Earth, in space on a rescue mission, in space surviving, and then the climax when she defeats the Queen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, I'll go with that.
All right.
Hmm.
I had said that I wanted to find examples of, where the second act doesn't work at all, or where the second act is more complicated than, a simple, what happens in the second act, but the story still works. This is an example the story still works. I don't think you can say easily what happens in the second act. without going through some amount of explanation
Yeah.
like I just did. But it's one of my favorite movies of
Yeah.
all time. I think most people would agree it is hands down one of the best sequels
Oh yeah,
ever.
yeah, by far.
Talking about direct
Yeah.
sequels, not franchise,
Yeah.
not legacy
Not
sequels,
requels
requels or anything like that. So
yeah.
like not Empire,
Yeah.
not but for like there was one movie and now there's a second
Yeah.
movie. This Godfather 2, Toy Story 2. That's kind of like that's when it comes to like the best sequels. That's sort of the list. The fact that the structure is maybe a little bit different certainly does not take away from people's ability to follow the story and enjoy the story.
Yeah. Tell us what you guys think. Is that it? Is that a good second act? Do you have a different opinion? Do you think it's a different kind of structure that we haven't thought of yet? Let us know.
And with this idea of what constitutes an act, there are some other movies that we both love that have also challenged me, and I'm gonna try and approach those with this new understanding, see if it holds up.
Okay.
But that will be a future episode. For now, I'm Taylor.
I'm Melissa.
And this is our Cinema Romance.
Bye.